Hello. Check, 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 check. All right. Until it turns blue. I'll put
guess I'm waiting on a thumbs up. Do I need a thumbs up? No, we ready to roll? Okay. 10 toes. All right. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Well, I always got to start with the sacred Detroit greeting of what up, though? What up? Thank you. Thank you. Not every room responds that way, so you already endeared to me. I want to welcome you all to the first Friday Forum, a part of the Just Community podcast brought to you by the Michigan Roundtable Just Community. My name is Joe Drew Hunley. I'm the Deputy Director, and this is going to be a live podcast panel. So we're really excited about it. Our title for today is From Surviving to Healing, Post-COVID Mental Health in Our Communities. Before we start, I am excited to give a quick read for our sponsor. Are you looking for new ways to bring your content to the masses? Whether you got a podcast, a talk show, a church broadcast, a class, a business event, or a message your audience needs to hear, Streamline gives you a better way to produce and present. Go live, pre-record your own show, invite guests, share your screen, manage your broadcast, and give your viewers a dedicated branded watch page right on your website. No more sending people to random links, bouncing between 5 different apps just to get your content out. With Streamline, you get live rooms, guest access, custom show setups, recorded content, and public or private broadcasts, all in one user-friendly platform. Your message deserves more than a basic live stream. Streamline. Broadcast smarter, reach further. Thank you to Streamline, our sponsor, who will also be streaming live today on the Michigan Roundtable webpage, as well as on our YouTube and Facebook. What up, though, family? Welcome to the Just Communities podcast. I'm your host, Joe Drew, Deputy Director of the Michigan Roundtable Just Communities. This is a space where we have real conversations about what it takes to build more than just a beloved community, right here and beyond. Each week, we're going to bring together voices from the work, that's organizers, that's leaders, creatives, and community members, to talk about the challenges we face, the solutions we're building, and the future we're creating together. And through the First Friday Forum, which is one of our programs, these episodes, we tap live community conversations, where different voices, perspectives, and lived experiences come together to wrestle with the issues shaping our communities today. This isn't just talk, it's a reflection, connection, and a movement. Because this is where community conversations turn into community change. We're again excited to be here for the Multicultural Conference and Belonging and Inclusion the Multicultural Conference for Belonging and Inclusion. And this conversation is something that we're all navigating. As I mentioned before, the title of today's conversation is Post-COVID Mental Health, especially in our minority communities. And what makes this conversation powerful is the range of perspectives that we have today on our panel. On the webpage, you all had full bios that I hope you all were able to read. The test will be a little later, but I'm not going to read their bios. What I am going to do is give you a short description and then go into one of my favorite activities to allow each of our panelists to introduce themselves. So first and foremost, Dr. You all know him. Dr. Jim Maher. Did I pronounce that correctly, Dr. Maher? I won't mess up next time, Dr. Maher. He's clinical director here at the MSP with decades of experience in clinical care training and behavioral health systems. Next up, we have Dr. Lisa Jackson. She's a professor and chair of psychology at Schoolcraft College with a background in behavioral neuroscience and a focus on health disparities and community-based safety. Also our esteemed board chair at the Michigan Roundtable for Just Communities. Next, we have Dr. Andre Johnson, founder and CEO of the Detroit Recovery Project, leading one of the most impactful community-based recovery organizations in the country. And last but definitely not least, we have Damara West, therapist, author, and founder of Be Well, Beautiful People, bringing lived experiences and holistic healing practices into her work. For my panelists, what I would like you to do in a concise but impactful way is introduce yourself using a belonging and inclusion activity that I love called My Fullest Name. What this activity allows you to do is introduce yourself by giving maybe a name, the anecdote, the meaning of your name, how you got your name. Maybe it's a nickname. What's the meaning of that nickname? We all know our names are powerful and part of our identity. So utilizing this way to introduce yourself gives a very powerful way for people to connect with you. Just to give you an example while y'all think about it, my last name is Drew-Hundley. Most times people ask if I took my wife's last name, which I didn't, though I don't begrudge anyone who does. She actually took my full hyphenated last name. My birth mother was Corinne Drew. My father, Joe Hundley. When I was conceived, they weren't married. They found out that she was terminally ill. She then soon passed when I was about 1, so they never got married, so they gave me both last names to honor her. So I've carried that on with pride, and now we are the first, I Googled it, we're the first and only Drew Hundleys walking the planet. So at least, unless others are kind of dark and don't have a social footprint, which is possible, right? Which is possible, but Dr. Jackson, you're looking at me, so that means you get to go first?
Jackson or Johnson?
Johnson.
Okay.
Sorry.
Hi, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, my name is Andre LaPierre Johnson, and my mother gave me my first name because it was the middle name of one of her favorite cousins growing up. It is a French name, I think, Andre and LaPierre, but no real other significant. I have a very plain name, Johnson.
Dr. Jackson.
Jackson is just about as plain, I think. I'm Lisa Rose Jackson, and apparently the entire time that my mom was pregnant, she intended to name me Karen. And the day after I was born, my dad walked in and said, "She does not look like a Karen." He said, "She definitely looks like a Lisa." So that's how I got that. My middle name is Rose, which is my mother's middle name as well, because my grandfather's name was Roosevelt. And so my daughter also has that middle name. My last name is Jackson, which is the name I was born with. I am married, and I did not take my husband's name when I got married because I'm very attached to my dad and to my family. And so that is how I'm Lisa Rose Jackson. I used to hate Rose, and I was like, you guys could have named me Petunia or something like awful, or like, why am I named for a flower, until I understood about my grandfather. In that case, I felt better.
Nice. Great foreshadowing by Mr. Jackson. Wow.
Hey y'all, hey beautiful people. My name is Damara Danielle West. When my mother was in labor, the nursing assistant, her name was Damara. She had never heard of the name before and decided to give me that name. And for many, many years, I was the only Damara. And so now I'm delighted when I come across other LinkedIn Damaras and just want to befriend them just for that reason. And then my middle name, Danielle, that derives from my father, whose name was Donald. And so, yeah, I love my name a lot. Sometimes it throws people. People oftentimes do not pronounce it correctly. That's okay. And for a long time, I let people call me D, but now I make them say Damara. And only my dearest friends can call me D. And so, yeah, that's the story of my name.
I'm working to earn that D.
Listen, you earned that D. I know.
Wow.
My name is James Michael Maher. My first name, middle name is after my grandfather, my mother's father. And what she mentioned to me is that was a tribute to him because she was the youngest of 8 children, and they grew up during the Depression, and it was to honor him because he got them through that period of time. My last name, Maher, is my grandparents on my father's side came from Syria. And it's a continuation of their name.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. Feel free to utilize that activity as you all see fit, and you could just send royalties to J. Drew Hundley. All right, so let's get started. I think this is a very general place. I will direct certain questions to you all, and we will save time for the audience to ask questions if you all have them. But for this one, I'll just open up to whoever feels the spirit to answer this question. When you think about mental health today, compared to before COVID, if we can even take our minds to before COVID, it feels like the 90s and before COVID all kind of weave together for me now. What feels fundamentally different when it comes to mental health today versus before COVID?
Yeah, so
If you don't mind using the microphone, thank you.
So first and foremost, I want to say that when I went to school to be a therapist, about 4% of the therapeutic pool looked like me. What do you think that percentage is now? 4%, right? And in a city like Detroit, where you have 4%, but the population is 80%. Not to mention you have, for every therapist, there are 500 people to be served. And so when you think about that, right, and knowing that people were already challenged by a myriad of mental health challenges, and then we had this catastrophe happen that rocked our world, that we're still grieving from, that I still see people masked up from, which is nothing wrong with that, right? Let me say there's no judgment, whatever people feel that they need to be safe. And I do think that we have normalized therapy a little bit more than what we did pre-COVID, right? So that is deeply encouraging to me. I entered the healing world as a therapist first, and then I meandered into holistic practice. You know, so I'm a meditation teacher, a breathwork teacher, nature-based practices, all kinds of things. And so I oftentimes say that therapy has become less and less taboo, and yet these other practices are still very much taboo. And so knowing the efficacy when it comes to dealing with mental health, and that talk therapy has a lot of limitations, unfortunately, when we're talking about PTSD, CPTSD, I think that those trends are still very much present. And what I want to see as we lean into more therapeutic modalities and normalize them, that we're also looking to other ways of practice that helps to support sustainable well-being, which oftentimes goes beyond talk therapy. Now, I believe in therapy, right? I'm a therapist. Trained a therapist, will always be a therapist, and it's my orientation. But I also believe that if we're talking about the healing of people, if we're talking about bouncing back more fully from COVID and its effects, it means that we have to widen the conversation more and more and more about what it means to be well, and providing people with lots of different pathways to go about doing that.
Please.
I'm not a therapist. But for a long time, I worked in the Office of Health, Equity, and Inclusion at the University of Michigan's Medical School, and I often think systemically. So I want to echo everything Tamara said, but I want to think about kind of, you ended thinking about talking about pathways and how we access mental health, and that's been a focus working with the Roundtable in particular. So I'm very interested in how we get people who have trauma upon trauma, economic challenges, health challenges, certainly mental health challenges, before COVID, and then certainly the deaths and long COVID incidents in the Black community is certainly higher than we see in other communities. And so more trauma on top of that. How do we get them into a place where they can do any kind of therapy? Talking, walking, breathing, somatic work, breath work. And so I've been thinking about how it is more and more necessary for us to take therapy to people, to take basic mental health, basic, blood pressure checks to the people. And so one of the things we worked on really hard was a grant that would allow us to do some mobile kind of work. We think about stigma so much, and with no disrespect whatsoever, a lack of education about what therapy is and what it can do for you. That it's just for crazy people, that it is not something Black people do. We don't do that. My dad ran community mental health in Detroit for many years when I was a kid, and his private practice was almost all Black folks, because back then, maybe it was 1% of Black folks, I have no idea. But, and so I think about how important it is to give folks an entryway, a path to get to understanding what taking care of the mental health can do for them. Because I think, at least in Zone 8 where we do our work, people are struggling to eat. There are no ways to get, prescription meds reliably. You've got to catch 2 buses to get your, metformin or whatever. People don't know if they have hypertension. They're undiagnosed diabetes. And so, and they're in survival mode. And so I think, we're trying to think about, kind of maybe at the very top or at the very bottom, how we get folks to be able to have, to get to that door.
Absolutely. Just to piggyback, so I want to just address the initial question. First and foremost, we got to know that COVID-19, it did not necessarily create this health disparity. The health disparity was already present. And I think what it did was intensify and it was more exposed. I work in Detroit, and you all know the Detroit area. My office is located on 6 Mile, right off I-75. I acquired an old Detroit public school building. When I moved in 2007, we used to average 1 or 2 people on each corner. Now there's an average about 8 or 9 people on each corner, from Woodward to I-75. That's a 5-block radius. So we got to be mindful that mental health is very prevalent in our homeless or unhoused population, and not that therapy is the all answer, is one answer, but the approach has to be a more ecosystem-oriented approach where we bring other entities together for the greater good of the people. Meaning that, people need housing, people need therapy, people need recreational activity, people need yoga, they need meditation, they need mindfulness. We got to make sure that we're able to take that approach. Physical health services. During COVID-19, I wrote a grant, got funded $4 million to develop a certified community behavioral health plan. And that's an approach where we use both physical health. We have a team of a psychiatrist, a medical doctor, nurse practitioner, a psychologist, master's level social worker, and the last is the person with the lived experience. Don't forget though, the value that those people bring to our services as well, because we know there's health disparities, but there's also mental health disparities, there's substance use disorder disparities, and in order for us to really make a difference, we have to have a collaborative approach.
Thank you. Thank you.
My perspective in terms of the clinic here next door, we had the circumstance of starting our first sessions with clients in February 2020. And then the pandemic came along. And after saying, God, come on, you can't do this. I think after that, the thing that we noticed most is that, first of all, having to pivot the propensity of Zoom sessions. It existed before the pandemic, but it wasn't really used that much, and all of a sudden, it became 100% all the sessions. And that was a challenge for our clients, very much. I think the biggest one was, I think in terms of the clients that contacted the clinic would tell me, those who work in the Black community would say, the shift I've had has been twofold. The first is, I lost my job, or more often, I got my hours cut dramatically. And now, either I don't have insurance, or I have such a large deductible, I might as well not have insurance. How can I, if I'm interested in therapy, if I get past the stigma that you talked about, Dr. Jackson, how can I do that? Where is it available? How can I get it? And then the other part of it makes me think of what Dr. Johnson was talking about when he talks about in his book as well. Ecosystem. What they would say is, I love my spouse and I love my children, but I feel like I'm spending way too much time with them now because I'm so socially isolated. I'm so fearful of going out in the community because it's like what Dr. Jackson and I were talking about before we started, not knowing how it gets transmitted, where do I get COVID, things like that. I'm with my family, and it's been a struggle. I realized that in terms of our ecosystem, it was pretty fragile. He interacted well, but I went to work, my spouse went to work, my kids went to school, and now we're all in the same room. How do we make that work?
May I add just one final thing? So what's occurred to me, and I've been living in Detroit now, it'll be 2 years at the end of May. And as I have explored the landscape here, I realize how rare it is still for people to, as I said before, to get therapy from someone who looks like me. We're out. Of course, we're out. And there's something very powerful about culturally responsive practice. I think we talk about this, but unless you have been on the other side of talking to somebody who speaks your language, even if your language is God, right? I always talk about the importance of speaking the language of the client, right? It doesn't matter what your language is. What matters is the world of the client. And I'm not saying that somebody has to have like a shared racial identity in order to do good work with them. But there's something about the lived experience that even though I don't live in Detroit and I'm from Kalamazoo, there's a shared language that I still have with people that look like me to some extent. And so as we're thinking about like the efficacy and helping people move along, we've got to really be willing to do the work necessary so that we see the full humanity of our clients and that we can lean into their worlds. Because if we can lean into their worlds, they can overcome anything essentially. There's nothing more powerful than the therapeutic relationship. There's nothing more powerful when people can share and unload things that they have never told anyone before and know that it has safe landing and to know that they have a fierce advocate that is going to help them as they meander through this dark territory before they get to the light. So I think this is very, very important as we think about what more might we do, not from a performative standpoint, not from a knowledge acquiring standpoint, but from an embodiment standpoint, so that we can do what we've been called to do within the clinical realm.
Okay, I gotta add on to that too, because I was thinking about intimate partner violence and how that went through the roof and was probably still underreported during COVID, right? Because everybody's together, nobody can get away to even report, et cetera, et cetera. And then I was thinking about talking to folks in those situations and how much culturally appropriate, culturally competent language matters, because you can't say, you really need to leave for your safety to someone who is more concerned about her children, for example, than she is about herself. And so we have to think about language in so many different ways, including, and that's the value of what you were saying in terms of having the language, because it isn't just the English, right? Or being able to be, I am not a polyglot, but being able to speak other languages confidently, it is the cultural language and understanding that piece of it when we're using the language.
I'm gonna jump in and keep it moving because I saw what you was about to do, Dr. Johnson. You all trying to make me obsolete in this whole thing. All right, no, let's keep the party going. I think I'll probably be leading you into other things that you're going to say anyway. Next, I want to kind of talk about this invisible way. So I'll direct this question, starting off between you, Dr. Lisa, and you, Damara, just from a science lens and more of a lived experience lens, respectively. What are people carrying right now that they don't always have the words or the language for? How have you seen that show up? How would you articulate that, this invisible weight that people are carrying today?
No, you go ahead. Because I don't need a mic.
I'm
sorry, I do need a
Mic, I do need a mic. I'm sorry. I thought I didn't need a mic, but I do need a mic. I apologize. Right, Joe said that. But I was thinking, everything. I don't know how to answer that question. I think it's all the things we had before. They're magnified. Economic stuff, first to be laid off, last to be rehired. No access to, food, longer COVID, more trauma. I don't even know what everyone's carrying. The folks I talk to are carrying so much of the time. Even people who are coming to Schoolcraft, kids showing up every day are still heavy with so many things going on. Not COVID related, that's so visible right now, but even immigration related. And then my students who went through COVID stuff and immigration stuff, like their whole, it's just, you go.
So I'm going to do my best to use as much brevity as possible because I have a lot that I want to say about this. And where I will start is here. About 70% of people that pursue therapeutic careers are entering the workforce because of their own trauma. How many people do you think that are on the pathway, no matter how many times that we're told to do our own work, let's be real, we ain't doing our own work, okay? How many people do you think out of the 70% actually seek therapy, which is the number one way that we get support? How many people do you think? What percentage of therapists that actually get support? and do therapy themselves?
20, 30,
10%.
It's about 30%. The majority of people that enter into the helping profession. So my first book is titled Me Too, A Therapist's Journey to Heal, Find Liberation, and Joy. And it's about my lived experience with complex childhood trauma. The reason why I wrote this book is because so oftentimes we professionalize our way in spaces. We speak the language of healing, and yet we have not done the work of healing. We know knowledge, we can diagnose someone, we can put a treatment plan in place, but it is taboo still to even name the fact that we too are survivors. So as we are working to normalize this, and one thing, I mean, we learn from a therapeutic standpoint that we're not supposed to self-coach. I actually don't believe in that. I believe that we self-disclose if it's going to help a client to move forward in their healing journey. That we are self-disclosing not because it's about us, but because it's about them and helping to make clear what this thing looks like, which is why storytelling is so powerful. So the question around what are people are carrying a lot. And then when you factor in non-secure attachment, that's what my second book is about that just came out, Love Will Liberate. We're talking 30% of the population that has a non-secure attachment style. Guess what? If you didn't rectify some of the caregiving that was not appropriate for you to feel loved and seen and heard, then guess what? You are now an adult and you are walking around with those wounds, and those wounds are showing up in your work. They're showing up with your clients, they're showing up in professional settings, they're showing up in your romantic entanglements, they're showing up everywhere. So as in the words of James Baldwin, whatever we don't face, we cannot heal. And so this is why you hear about people, this is the last thing I'll say, that have breakdowns at the age of 50, 60, 70. Why? Because trauma gets stored in the body. Whatever that doesn't come out is still eventually coming out, y'all. And when we think about disease is oftentimes not the manifestation of what we think it is. Disease is oftentimes rooted in our minds and rooted in the blocked energy in our bodies. This is why somatic practice is so important. Nature-based practices are so important. So when you talk about it's endless the things that we're carrying if indeed we have not done the work of the baggage in which we carried before we became the professionals that we are or aspiring to be. And I'm gonna mic drop on that.
I cannot, you might be able to help me. There's a Black woman who wrote a book, and she was in the Black Lives Matter movement. I think she was in some other movements as well. You and I have talked about this book. And what she was talking about is how activists, how nonprofit leaders cannot do their work if they don't do that work. How all of that trauma it implicates our decision making, et cetera. So we're out here trying to serve the community, and we haven't done our own work. And how debilitating that is on the person, but also the quality of the work. And you're like, I don't have time. The world is burning. I need to do the thing. But we have to do the work. So therapists certainly, but even folks in the nonprofit sector out there, right, need to do the therapy as well. I'm not a therapist, but certainly I'm in psychology because of my own trauma. I mean, I think so many of us are. And you know, my dad was a therapist, and you know, he was a kind of a humanistic with a little bit of Freud going on in there. And I was just like, oh my God, it is not potty training, Dad. It's not. And as I got older, I was like, it's definitely the brain. And then later, you know, as I got older, we could talk about brain scans. And then he was like, ooh, you know, maybe we can do this, maybe we can do that. And so it evolved a bit, but it's so necessary for all of us. And then I look at folks who don't have access to, I don't know, diabetes test strips.
Yeah. Dr. Jim, Dr. Andre, care to add on? The next question is coming to both of you all, so feel free to add on to this, but also be prepared for the next question.
No, go ahead.
I think the only thing that I would add is that along the lines of what both of you are mentioning, the biggest difficulty in terms of the research and as well as people that have called into the clinic and talked about with me is that prior to coming for therapy, their first line defense was to go to the ER. And no different in many ways than if you were to wait until you passed out, or until you had a heart attack before going to the ER. Not getting that treatment in steps from 1 through 9, waiting to step 10. just how destructive that is.
Yeah, and I remember because I was working at the clinic under Dr. Mayheim during that time. And we had a number of individuals who were struggling with suicidality. We had a number of individuals struggling post mental health complex PTSD, which was really big. I remember Dr. Mayer called me one day. He said, Andre, I got a person who asked for you, a person of color. I thought, oh, I'll get a black client finally. And it was a young Hispanic man who really talked about his anxiety and stress. And he had become somewhat obsessed with watching Donald Trump on the news. And it created all this type of internal problems. And he also experienced some racism at his job. And so we did a lot of work. And I learned a lot during that process. So I think, and then the other thing we don't talk about is the social isolation that young kids experience. And now those kids are now younger adults who didn't really experience their social skills have become somewhat stagnant. And then on top of that, we also have in Detroit over 100 medical marijuana dispensaries. So there's been an increase in marijuana uses among young people in the city of Detroit. Now they get a cookie, they got some THC in it. And not to mention all the other things that come in. Everything is compounded. The prison system, the mental health challenges, and the disparities have continuously grown. And the city has thrived in other areas, but there's almost a generation of people who have been left behind.
I just want to say really quickly, it's not just very quickly. I know you're going to keep us on track, and please do. It's not just young people that are facing social isolation. In fact, the World Health Organization has named social isolation as a pandemic. So this is, and I believe that in part what has driven this is COVID-19, right? We were already increasingly becoming more socially isolated as of 1990 in terms of the data. And so it's the collective, and although we are hardwired for connection, and relationships affect our well-being more than anything else that we will do. More than anything else that we will do. Relationships can take you high to the depths of hell, and they can take you to heaven if that's what you believe in, right? To paradise. And so I just wanted to name, it's not just young people, it's the collective, right, that is faced with this devastation of social isolation.
Thank you all. Jump in here. Kind of piggybacking, it's a very similar thought, but I would love for you all to double click a little more. And I'll start with you, Dr. Andre, if I can. We know that this pandemic didn't impact everybody the same. I think that's a fair thing for us to say. From your own experiences, how did COVID uniquely affect the mental health in the Black and the brown community from what you've seen? And I'll come to you next.
So, I was a student here at that time. So we experienced isolation because I want to say it was my second semester as a PsyD student. And so instead of being able to come into the classrooms, which the school made adjustments for us to have our classes remote, and that wasn't the same. And then you all see my lovely wife sitting in the front. We were in the process of remodeling our kitchen, and our entire kitchen was gutted, flooring, everything, no stove, no refrigerator. The Monday that the world shut down, we had to go back into caveman days to cook and eat. Or cook and eat, and both of our kids were in college, and our kids returned home as well, and we came together as a family to do the best we could with what we had, and we sat down and we had breakfast, lunch, and dinner generally every day, and we played puzzles, we played pranks, we played games, and we were silly. I acted like I boo-booed on myself. And some peanut butter. We just was goofy, right? But on the flip, we had to make fun because it was a very depressing time because I stopped counting after 27 people I knew had died from COVID-19. And I'm really enmeshed in the recovery space in our community where I'm talking to somebody in the city of Detroit on one day, and then I may be talking to somebody in Birmingham, Michigan. And you see the disparity, and you see that the death is growing, and the lack of access. During COVID, people didn't want to take the test, people didn't want to take the medicine, and so I had to get up and encourage our community to get involved and do some of this stuff. Although some of it is still questionable, but if it's going to prevent death, I'm all for it. You know what I mean? What was your question again?
So the question was just around the unique difference of how the mental health was impacting Black and brown communities post-COVID.
Okay. So thank you for that clarification. I just had some stuff I had to get off.
Yeah.
But the mental health implications was there was a spike in marital problems. A lot of relationships started to people found out they really couldn't live with people when they had to live with them 24/7. So a lot of domestic violence occurred. There was an increase in overdose deaths. There was an increase in suicide among younger population because people were going towards the social media more and more. So there was just a spill of all kinds of problems that I've seen, particularly in the Black and brown community, because they had the highest incidence and rates of all those areas that I've just described.
You cared. I wanted to give you a space because Dr. Lisa's about to jump in.
No. I can take your turn.
I think there are three things that we noticed at the clinic. The first was a lot of grief. Along the lines of what Dr. Edson was saying, so many people not only lost individuals they were close with, but couldn't see them. We've heard so many stories about my loved one went to the hospital, I couldn't even say goodbye to them in their last moments. And how incredibly profound that is. I think the second thing is that they would say, this was after the vaccine came along. And one of the things that Dr. Jackson and I were talking about is that a lot of people don't remember for a long time there wasn't a vaccine. And so it was a roll of dice anytime you would happen with anybody. And thinking, when that vaccine eventually did come along, should I take it? Can I trust it? And in particular, the experience in the Black community about how can I trust that this thing that's going into my arm, into my bloodstream, is not something that's going to hurt me. It's doing what they're saying it's going to do. And a lot of our clients of color would talk about Tuskegee and saying, you know what? Tell me how this is different than years ago, where the government's saying, oh, don't worry, don't think about it, just take this, you're probably okay. And it turned in case, it was actually the opposite. Then probably the third thing that individuals talked about most is that we had several clients that said it was very tricky because what was being discussed is if I interact with you, it might harm and kill me. And it felt too similar to what they've heard for so many decades in terms of racism. That if you live near me, if I interact with you, if I work with you, if I go to school with you, there's going to be negative impact.
I remember talking about COVID during this time. I could not.
No,
Okay.
I always
And
love
just-
hearing you speak, Dr. Lisa.
No, and very much like what you're talking about, that so many people felt that anxiety of, you know, oh, I'm different, or you're dangerous, or how do we assess that kind of thing? And so we know that Black folks had higher rates of long COVID, higher incidences of COVID, lots of conspiracies that there was tried out on us, and even maybe that maybe everybody got it in some sort of benign, natural way, but also then the lack of treatment opportunities would be there would be disparity in that as well, and so Black folks were largely going to be left to die, and that would make room for other people to do work. I mean, and those things were real to people in part because of Tuskegee, but I do want to remind all of us, you guys remember, well, maybe you weren't born, all of you, but 2015, the APA acknowledged that we're still being unethical, we're still doing unethical stuff in 2015 with folks in Guantanamo Bay. So it isn't 100 years ago. We're all aware of how unethical our and discriminatory our government is. And so I think, all of that sort of translated into higher rates of suicidality and higher rates of anxiety and depression and complex PTSD. And the economic thing was just added to that. And I think about the disparity between who you saw. I grew up in Detroit, but I live in Ann Arbor. In Ann Arbor, people had extra disposable income because they weren't sending their kids to camp, they weren't sending their kids to daycare, and everybody was still working at home getting paid, didn't miss a paycheck, didn't miss a beat. My neighborhood was full of people walking, families walking together because they couldn't go to the gym, but they're not having to pay gym membership money. So that experience is very different from my brother who lived in Detroit and at that time was unhoused and was living at the Detroit Rescue Mission. Yep, and got COVID and was shipped to a nursing home, and I could talk to him through a window kind of thing. And so it's those just tale of two cities right there, but the despair there and me trying to talk him through this, this is, because he doesn't want to move to Ann Arbor and live at my house. So he's gonna live in the Detroit Rescue Mission. But the hundreds of folks in those nursing homes with him struggling with COVID, we don't have a vaccine, we don't know what causes it yet, we don't know how it's transmitted. Because remember when we thought it was like just on stuff all the time, we weren't even thinking it was in the air, and the hopelessness, and you all know that that's one of the things that we are most concerned about with suicidality. So I was very struck by that. We seem to not remember what it was like in the beginning when we didn't know anything.
It makes me think that, and just for the sake of time, I'm gonna move us on, but it does make me think of the misconceptions. I remember there was a slice of time on social media that it was like Black people are immune to this, and then the NBA shut down, and then we were like, okay, that's not true. So I have a question for everyone, and we are bumping up against it. I want to give a chance for anyone to ask questions. So I'll ask for your impact yet concise answers to these next two short questions. We always talk about, the issues and the challenges, but let's talk about healing, right? A very, very, very wise person once said to me, I said, hurt people, hurt people. He said, well, heal people, heal people. And I was like, whoa, that kind of blew my mind. He's sitting over there, act like he didn't say it, didn't he? What does healing actually look like? Because I hear it all the time, but what in practical terms does it mean to be healed? And I would love to hear from each of you before I ask my final question. Please.
Is that you? Okay. Healing for me is really about knowing that you have the power and the will to be able to live as fully as you choose. You to be able to pursue the career that you want, make enough money for a good quality of life, have quality relationships, move your body in ways that feels good, have a spiritual practice. So I think about well-being on a mind, body, spirit level. And I think that needle moves depending on what's happening in life, right? The extent to which we were well during COVID is not the same to the extent that we're well today, particularly if we've been doing the work, right? And so I think that's what it actually means. And we get to decide for ourselves. Is when I hear clients saying things like, I don't want to have children because you see the state of the world, I'm like, whoa, I see, but do you want to have children? Let's talk about the vision that you have for your life, because I understand that all of these barriers exist and barriers are going to be here regardless, but what do you want for your life? And it's about having the liberation to be able to say yes to yourself and to say no in times when it doesn't make sense for you, and to know within yourself what you need at any given time to be well. And that is ultimately about your power.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you.
As I hear the question, what I think about is education. I don't mean just in schools. I mean, as far as learning for people, learning from their wisdom. I'll give you an example. I don't know if you're all familiar with this, but I'm a white male. I was born and raised in Southwest Detroit. And in addition to that, was and is still a history buff in terms of the history of the city. And so as a result, I thought I had a pretty good understanding of what went on in the city. And then I had to have the cultural humility when I first started working as a psychologist in a hospital, an inpatient unit with geriatric psychiatric clients. And I think of the presentation from earlier today that Danielle Love gave. And the quote that sticks with me is that Black elders are repositories of intergenerational knowledge. And that's what was the case. And so my time on that unit, I was taking to school in a really good way. About 2/3 of our patients were African American. And I'll never forget one of the interactions with me was a 75-year-old African American man who said, as we got to know each other, you know, I couldn't even stay in this town. It was a hospital in Town River, Detroit. I couldn't even stay in this town. And so that's why I saw a run on the inpatient unit. And I'm here overnight. And went on to describe to me about sundown towns and what it was like to think about. He would say, I would drive down south from Detroit toward Monroe, and I would intentionally avoid certain towns, take other routes, because there were signs as you went into the town, yeah, no blacks interested here. Keep driving, keep going. Talking about that, talked about the Burwood Wall and what it was like that there was literally a wall built on 8 Mile. And thinking, okay, how many people know that? How many people of younger generations know that those things happen? So that's where I think when that happens, it was decades before. I'm like you, Dr. Jackson, I'm dating myself. It feels like this was like 1920. It wasn't. The sad part, it was 1995. And thinking, why didn't I know this? Why didn't I know this, and why might a lot of people not know this in the future? That's why I think education would be so much a priority.
I was thinking about healing is community. And you've talked so much about connection. And one of the things I teach my students is that, you know, we can think about areas of the brain when we think about anything. And so I talk about a part of the brain that is dedicated to paying attention to what other people do, as evidence to them that we are social animals, that we are not meant to be isolated, and thinking about how when we are feeling suicidal, when we're feeling depressed, when we're feeling anxious, you know, isolating is the opposite of what we need to do. I was involved in starting a nonprofit called Care-Based Safety that is an alternative emergency response to police. And one of the things we said is that healing is joy. It's the ability to have joy. It feels like grandmother's hug. So we are a bunch of two educated folks sitting in a room talking about what is actual healing, what is actual safety, what does it feel like, what is it? And one of the things that I think you both have said that we are very firm on is that there is so much knowledge, there's so much wisdom in communities, no matter how low of a socioeconomic status they have. There are resources there, and we need to make use of those resources, and people need to understand that they are the resource. And I could tell you examples, city after city after city, where a neighborhood or a block gets together and decides to solve a problem and does so in an appropriate manner for the people in that community, and that is what healing is, and that is what safety is. And we all have that ability to do that. And we have the ability to help facilitate that. Not in our way, but in the way of the folks in that community. And that is something I don't get paid to do. That is something I do because I believe in it. And it's something, I mean, I know how you all. But I'm just saying, and I'm not like volunteering you all to do anything. I'm just saying that, when you get to that space, it's something that we all have the power to do, is to help others recognize their power, use their power, and part of that power is for healing, and that makes your community safer in every sense of that word.
Ain't nothing else to say. Let's get the question.
I didn't think you were gonna do that. That's great. Thank you. Great assist there, bro. I appreciate that. My healing is if my Pistons win today. So next up, I see y'all with me. I have an opportunity for any questions. We don't have a lot of time, but if we have any questions from the audience, please feel free to throw your hands in the air. Yes, sir. I see you there.
Yes, hi. This is fantastic. My question is, coming as someone coming from the American community where discussion around mental health was borderline taboo until about maybe 10 years ago, I think the issue, I think there's also the cultural dynamic of an individualist belief versus a collectivist belief. And so, because part of the reason that it was such a stigma was because you having mental health problems reflected on your family, which then was a reflection on the entire community. And so, what does healing look like if you come from a culture that you are not really seen as your own person, more as an extension of a greater part?
Yeah, that's such a,
Excellent.
that's a big question.
I want to say something.
Go ahead.
I just going to say briefly. I think it's normalization. I think we're steady combating stigmatization, and those are some of the underlying factors. But I think we have to become more normalized, because Dr. Samora, she talked earlier about how mental health, in a way, more people are seeking therapy. But we got to talk about it in a way like these podcast shows, radio shows, in community settings, and we got to include all cultures. Yeah, we need to do a TikTok with all cultures. I mean, seriously, we're being funny about it, but these things do make an impact. We have to become advocates in our community, and we have to step up, and we got to say, hey, it's okay. And we shy away from words. We no longer use words like crazy. Somebody already said it earlier. Ain't gonna beat y'all up, but we just want to be mindful in the context of where we are and who we're talking to, because we all have the opportunity to educate somebody.
I think too, though, so I think about the difference between individualistic and collectivist cultures all the time. And I think one of the things is that, yes, it reflects badly on your family if you have a problem, right? But your family is also a system. And so if you are struggling, then your family is struggling. And so even if it is within your family system, your family loves you, your family wants the system to be well. And I think that's where it seems like people have success. I have Filipino students, we talk about that. My son lived in Japan for a long time, and that's a huge thing. And so when we approach it from that perspective, that sure, no matter what we say and do, it's going to reflect on the family. And so we think about then how do we flip that, and then try to think about the inner workings and the health of the family.
I want to say something really quickly. This is a really, really important question, because a lot of times in the U.S. context, we're talking about black and white, and I think we have to ask ourselves this question. Is this oppressive? Is this cultural context oppressive for me? And I left a conference before I got here, and there was something really powerful shared. And there's a podcast that I just listened to about a monk that left her, I can't think, she studied under, it's gonna come to me, the Lotus something, right? And so it was taboo. She left this community, all she knew. And there was, her friend asked her to come home. I think sometimes we have to leave our cultural context a little bit, and we have to be daring enough to open the doors to other ways of being. but it takes great risk. And so from a cultural standpoint, we have big C culture and then we have micro culture. So I could argue in the Black community, we have some of the same remnants. In the Latinx community, we have some of the same remnants. In the Muslim community, right? Depending on, we have these remnants because if you're a person of color, you're coming from the collective and not the individual, right? So that's one thing that separates us. And so I always come back to whether we're talking about religion or we're talking about family customs, is this custom, is this religious context, does it make me feel good? Does it feel liberating? Is this the belief system that I want to impart to my children if indeed you decide to take that pathway? So you're not abandoning every single aspect of your cultural roots. You're inviting in different ways of being, but somebody has to be willing to be the disruptor. And I understand that that takes a great deal of risk, but somebody has to be the person that separates from the pack and leaves to do something different for the restoration that's needed for the collective. Because even when we leave, I remember when I wrote my first book, and my family was up in arms, y'all. They were mad at me. Oh, you got to tell our business as a family? Because I can't talk about my trauma without talking about my mother, without my father, without the ways that my siblings were also impacted. It's my story, but it's their story too. But what I've learned is that as we are on the pathway of healing and liberation, eventually people will come along. Everybody's not coming with us, y'all. But it takes the disruptor to begin to bring people along. And I believe that all of us have the propensity and the capacity to be disruptors in whatever respective field we choose to work in whatever way we decide to do it. Because this might not be your only stuff, right? I've done therapy and healing work in many, many forms, but I started as a therapist and have just adopted different ways, right? So I hope that helps.
Very well said. Dr. Jackson, if you don't, I'm sorry. I've been given the power to be between us and dinner, so I just got to make sure that I don't get I saw one more question. I got time for one more question. I'm sorry. I saw his hand up the last time, so my apologies. I'm sorry. I know, but I've only got enough time for one more. So if you don't mind, sir, I'll get to you, and then during dinner, you can walk up to him and ask him questions.
When you talk about and especially during the COVID era, I mean, personally, there was so many questions. First, you can't see people, you can't go to institutions without that. In addition to that, you question how could there be some spiritual being that's going to create such a devastating global concern. And I'm wondering, I think we all face some form of mental health things that we do. And what are ways to introduce spirituality as a healing method effectively?
I have time for one answer.
No, you go.
Jeez. Somebody pick up.
All right, somebody pick up the daggone mic, right? So I think we just have to normalize talking about spirituality. And one of the things, what I have done to honor the collective is to name God, universe, source, creator, right? Because no matter what somebody's religious orientation is, we are all spiritual beings. Atheists, that's a form of spirituality. Whether we, agree with that path or not, it is a form of spirituality. And so I think that we have to widen the way that we think about what it means, that the fact that we are spirit beings and that we are meant to be connected to all living things on the planet. And part of that is exposing people to experiences that helps them to slow down, to be one with self. Because when we slow down, we understand that God is not something outside of us. We are God. God is in us. And it's really just a matter of us channeling that through practice. And I oftentimes say, all we have is practice. And then we have default. You stop practicing, you're going to go right back to who you were before you started practicing. But the more you practice, the more you embody the very things that you espouse to believe, right? And this is why we have to experience something and not just acquire knowledge about it. Because if you have a spiritual experience, baby, anybody had a spiritual experience? Nobody has to tell you about, nobody has to convince you about the power of spirituality, right? So I think that we have to normalize it and invite it in. And one of the ways we do it is when our clients start using the language of God, whatever it might be, you use that language too. The reason why we mirror and we lean in all of these things that we learn to do behaviorally is about connecting to the spirit of the person. Right? And so I think that we can do it in much easier ways than what we do just through a level of intentionality and knowing that this is a part of the makeup of what it means to be sustainably well.
It's a beautiful way to finish off for today. My apologies to the esteemed panel for if I cut you off. Blame it on the time constraints and not the brother. We have to thank the Michigan School of Psychology for this opportunity. Absolutely. Anyone who's watching the live stream, who may watch the recording on YouTube or otherwise, we appreciate you for tapping in with us. This is the Just Communities podcast, brought to you by the Michigan Roundtable for Just Communities. If something from today's conversation stayed with you, share it, talk about it. Most importantly, act on it. This work doesn't stop when this episode ends. It continues in our communities, in our relationships, and the choices we make every single day. If you were looking for ways to stay connected with the Michigan Roundtable, we have a couple things for you. Here on the sign, there's a couple QR codes that you can scan, learn a little more about us. We also have 2 amazing opportunities coming up to interact with us. I'll keep this on as long as they allow me to. First off will be a red carpet experience documentary premiere of the award-winning documentary, Redemption Road. It is the story of Dr. Yusef Bunchi Shakur, who you'll hear from here in the next hour or so. It'll be held June 25th at the Charles H. Wright Museum. We would love to see anyone who wants to be a part of that in the building. Tickets are there on the QR code. And then in November, we're having our 76th annual community tribute dinner. This year it is a sneaker ball. It will be held downtown at the One Campus Marshes Elevate buildings on the top floor, One Campus Marshes. Beautiful venue, be an amazing time, amazing guests. So we would love to see you in the building for that as well. Again, thank you all, and thanks to our sponsor, Streamline, for streaming this event live. It's our first time being able to do so. So with that being said, again, my name is Joe Drew. Thank you for the time.
I would like to give a quick thank you again so much to all 4 of our panelists and to Joe for doing a wonderful job moderating. So thank you all so much for being here. For dinner, the pop and water is in the back corner, and there will be a line that'll start in about 0 minutes. And so with that, we are going to add a couple chairs to some of the square tables. So those of you sitting on the couches, if you would like to, we welcome you to find an open chair to come join the conversation.